Hello class, welcome to demonstration number 2. With demonstration number 2, I need you to pull out this handout. It's the second one. The second one on the top should say rib cage and shoulder girdle. Rib cage, as all of you know, and my little skeleton here, we all know where the rib cage is. The shoulder girdle is this top part of it. Okay, the top part of it is being created by the scapula in the back, the clavicle in the front, and the sternum, the sternum down the front. Okay, so it's composed of those parts. So with your handout, I'm going to go through the terms that you're going to be responsible for when we get to the test on the bones that you need to memorize. And I want to point this out in light of the parts. So this is a scapula. This is a scapula from the back coming at you and from the front. And so with the scapula is what you're going to have is, this is the spine of the scapula. The spine of the scapula is going to be important for us. You can see it from the back view a little bit on the model, but there is a plane break there, so it's an important landmark. So the end of the spine of the scapula is what's known as the chromium process. The chromium process is this edge. That edge is to be found on your shoulder right here. There's always a highlight on it. It's going to become an important landmark for us. If you notice it from the side view, it's on an angle going down in the back. It's not horizontal. We got to take note to those things. So, chromium process. This is known as the glenoid cavity. This is where your arm will go into. The humerus bone goes into the glenoid cavity. Glenoid means shallow. So it's very shallow, so the ball moves around very easily. This piece here is known as the coracoid process. Coracoid process, we will draw it on the front view. The coracoid process is important to know where it is because when we get into the muscles, the bicep muscle, one of the heads connects there and other things are going to connect, tendons. And so we need to know where this process is. This is the superior angle of the scapula. Superior meaning on top. This is the inferior angle on the medial side. This is on the lateral side. So there's two angles that we need to be aware of. Okay, basically that's pretty much the terms that I have on there for you. Here I just called it the crest of the spine, but same thing. Now, when we move to the bottom, it's going to talk a little bit about the rib cage. Some of the parts that we want to be aware of is the top of the sternum bone that goes up here is known as the manubrum. The manubrum, which I'm going to sketch it out in just a minute, there's three little curves on the top. First one is what all of us know is the pit of the neck. The other one, the clavicle rotates on it, right? So it's very wide. And then, of course, there's almost a vertical plane where the first rib connects, little concave, and then what happens is the sternum bone connects into this angle here. Sternum bone is there. Into the sternum bone, there's going to be your second rib that's going to fall half on both points, which is going to become important. Sternum goes from narrow to wide. Underneath here is a little cartilage. It's either known as the Insoform Cartilage, or I think on the list it's called Glenoid Cartilage. Either way, the cartilage for us is going to come important. I don't have that. The other thing that I want you to take notice to, the last piece in our puzzle today, is the clavicle bone. The clavicle bone is what all of you know is your collarbone, right? The collarbone's going to have three important bends to it. There's going to be this end part that's going to curve back, right? It's going to come around and connect. Believe it or not, some people don't know how this is all connected in there. But this piece connects into this piece on the inside. I know it's hard to see. In the classroom, I pointed this out in the skeleton, but these pieces go together like this, creating the top part of your body being the shoulder girdle. So our clavicle bone. One of the characteristics of the clavicle bone, where the medial part of it, meaning the part close to the middle of your body, is round and thick. As it gets to the shoulder, it turns and becomes very flat. Okay? So those are the pieces. So what I want to show you is this manubrum, And again, as all of you should know by now, the way that this goes is as I'm drawing this stuff, I need you to draw along. And then once I'm done with drawing all of this out, after you watch this demonstration, then it's up to you to look at your anatomy books and look at different views and different angles. It's too much for me to show you. I'm going to show you about 3 views and some details, but it's too much for me to do 4 and 5 different views. So after this, I need you to look into those and then try to put the parts together from various angles. So anyways, our manubrum bone, here's what happens. If I start off with a straight line like this, okay, this straight line is going to represent where the first rib is, okay? With that straight line, we're going to take an angle, and it's going to angle in a little bit. I'm doing this real large because when I do it on the drawing, it's going to look small. So this is where our first rib's going to connect, and then it takes a little concave doing this, and then it's going to come over this way, and then it's going to connect to the sternum, also known as the gladiolus. It goes from narrow, and usually if you put a little dimension to it, it's more convex than anything else. This top piece now, this is where the first rib is going to come in, which we'll show you in a second. The top piece of this looks like this. There's a concave, very shallow, and then there's another concave that goes down a little bit and goes down a little bit. This piece that we just sketched is the manubrum. It looks like a little top of a tie. And what happens is your first rib comes and hooks up here, comes around, hooks here, and the rib's going to cut in here and cut in here. And so it hooks into this first piece. Ultimately, when we sketch this out, the second rib is going to come and meet, well, if I get it right, the second rib is going to come around like this and come midway, and then this will wrap around and connect onto this. So this is where the second rib comes. The first rib's going to come into here. So it's very important in terms of having a little plane there to come up with that angle. Anyways, the gladiolus is going to do this. It turns on the bottom like this. I think of it kind of like a tie shape, like a tie going from narrow to wide. The Insoform cartilage, we kind of stylize it like this. It's a cartilage. It is important because eventually it becomes the widest point, ultimately, of the rib cage. So the widest point of the rib cage is going to be there. So when you ultimately freehand this rib cage, once you find out what our measuring system is, you're going to find out our halfway point is here, and a little below the halfway point is the Insoform cartilage, and that's where your widest point of the rib cage is. So that is our manubrum and sternum, okay? Again, just trying to do this as a blow-up version, so all of you can kind of make a little sketch of it, so when I'm doing it smaller, you have a good idea of what these parts look like, okay? The scapula, which is a little more challenging of a shape, so I want to show it to you in a couple of ways. To generalize it, like if I start with a line down the middle, just to say the middle of the rib cage, just so I can get these parts in place. So to generalize this in its simplest sense, we can start off with a straight line. Now this is it in its simplest sense. About here is where the spine of the scapula is, and this can go like this, and this will do this. And this is our simplest version. Now this version, sorry, I'm starting to make it more complicated and don't know it. This simplified version is the version that you want to get familiar with from all different angles on the rib cage. So in other words, if somebody made a rib cage and started to turn it in an angle like this, and watching our widest point, we'll watch those things, then is what you do is once you place this, you want to say this is at an angle because it's going back a little bit. And so this scapula is going to go here. So you want to watch your angles. And so if I do this and keep these lined up, and as you're going to find out, there's going to be an angle here. So then I can turn my rib cage at whatever angle I want. And this is a very simplified version of the scapula. And you want to play with that from all different angles and get familiar with it, okay? Now, okay, so here's the left one. Here's the one on the right. Try to line them up. Okay, so there's our generalization of our scapula. To refine it a bit, our superior angle, as I just talked to you about a moment ago, angles this way, okay, and about the way that I've got it. So, so about like that, the angle should be pretty close. Whoops, sorry. It goes like this. This is doing this. Sorry about that, everyone. All right, that's better. So you're going to modify that and come up with our superior angle. I just have to adjust my charcoal for a second here. Superior angle, right? Then is what we're going to do for the glenoid cavity. Right about here, you're going to straighten this up. So I'm going to do this. In reality, it would come up a little bit like that. All right? And then is what we're going to do is we're going to adapt this by angling this in abruptly. And then we're going to bring it around and put the inferior angle. So it's doing this to this to this. All right? So this isn't straight. You can do it like that. Varies and out and in. That's our shape to the scapula. More accurate. Okay. Okay. So once you play around with the generalized version and get familiar with that shape, placed in various angles, and again, this is what you're going to have to do on your own, then we're going to begin to taper this. Now, the spine of the scapula angles from this break up like this. All right. So usually we would say the height of it would come up to about as high as I've got it here. A little higher, depends on the angle that you're looking at it. So the spine of the scapula is going to go up, okay? Making one of the important plane breaks in our back. So it creates this wonderful curve like this on your back. All of you have seen it. The trapezius muscle is going to come from the back of the skull and widen like this eventually and give you the shape of your back, right? But anyways, and then you can see it come together, but I just want you to show you how it kind of pieces together. But the spine of the scapula is what I want to show you, and this takes some working with to do it. So if I take my height, say here, the construction line is right about where the glenoid cavity is. The edge of the chromium process angles down like this. And all of you have seen this on your body, okay, or on the model. So all of you have seen your shoulder goes down a little bit. Now here's the tricky part. This curves out a little bit like this, and it makes a curve in, straightens up, and I'm going to angle it down. And this one takes a concave, moves in, and then there's an underplane that does this. And so there's a plane that sticks up, and then the glenoid cavity is here. So this is the spine of the scapula. There's a top plane to it that you got to get familiar with. This, I'm just darkening it because it sticks up a little bit, okay? And that's the scapula. So when you look at it, you'll see that plane underneath. And is what's important with the scapula, you have to get familiar with this, is this spine. The spine has a thickness to it. This goes this way and this turns this way. So in other words, there's an angle going this on this plane and this one goes this way. And you want to play with it. So when you have access to the skeleton in the classroom, you want to go up to the skeleton and you want to draw this shape. So a lot of times when we're working from the model, you want to get there a little bit early. And when you get there early, I'll have the skeleton out. I have about 3 of them in the classroom. And as what you're going to do is you're going to come and sketch these things. And you got to try to get used to watching how those shapes go. So again, I'll show it to you on the other side. So this is going to break. And again, I'm just taking the time to do this so that when I do it on the, where we're working with the proportions, it's going to be much smaller, so you'll know how it goes. So this is going down. I don't know if you can see it. This is small, but this is what I'm drawing. That angle is that angle, and it's visible from the back view on every model. All of you have seen it. The clavicle is higher. Clavicle comes a little higher, and that drops down, giving us the characteristic of the person's shoulder. So as small as it is, it becomes important. So this is going to curve out and around like this, right? And then it's going to pinch up a bit like this, a concave, and straightens out and then curves down. So let's say like this and curve it down. This one's going to be concave and meet this, and then this is going to angle in abruptly, and this is going to hook across, okay? So I do it better if I'm not thinking about it. But anyways, that's the bottom plane, and this becomes our top plane. So experiment with that shape in order to get that right. So these are our major parts again. Get familiar with them. Superior angle here at the top on the medial side, inferior angle on, the medial side, lateral side. We've got the inferior angle. We've got the glenoid cavity from the back view. We don't see it. We just see where it would go. And then, of course, we've got the spine of the scapula, and we've got the chromium process, which is this edge here. Chromium process, that edge. So all of our pieces. I'm going to show you one other enlargement, and then I'm going to start to show you the proportional system and how all of this works together. So our last one is the clavicle, and then this is all of our big pieces. And with this in mind, you should have no problem drawing it in our proportional system. The clavicle bone, when you're looking down on it, is like a Cupid's bow. And so it takes a curve back and then it straightens up. But you want to get familiar with this shape in this class, because I'm going to be having you draw the skeleton and the model once you get a little familiar with it. We're going to do it in our gesture drawings. I'm going to have you search it out. So to make a Cupid's bow, I have to get some proportions. So I have to say that's my center. So if I take that bone this way, what happens is there's an angle here for where the Y point is on the medial side of that clavicle. And what happens is there's a curve here, and it's going to curve back, and then it's going to curve back even further. So it's going to do this. So watch that curve. I'm going to try to put this one in. Okay, so in other words, there's one angle, two angles. There's a convex and a concave right there. So it goes this way and this way. And then what's going to happen at the end, it curves out at us a little bit like this. And on the end, there's two planes. There's one going this way, it turns towards us. It angles back like this, hits flat here, and then moves in here. And it would meet here. So a little narrower, I guess, and I've got it, but you should be able to see it well that way. So I'm going to do this one. I'm going to curve this one out a little bit, angle it towards us. First plane, second plane, flattens out in back, and then comes around this way. Okay. So these pieces, this would have a little, it's more like this, all right? All right, so that's better. So what happens with this is this becomes 1/3. These, if I have them right, which I didn't measure them out, but this is 1/3. 1, 2, 3. We usually divide these in thirds. They're divided in thirds because eventually the pectoral muscle of your chest is going to connect to this third, and it's going to come over to the humerus bone here. The deltoid muscle is going to start to come over to this point as well as to this point. So the deltoid muscle is going to connect to this 2/3, the pectoral muscle to that third, and you want to be able to put that into your imagination, because once we get into the muscles, these three planes are going to become very important to get the dynamics of the perspective. So that's our clavicle. Quick version of the clavicle. So now we're going to put all of our pieces together. So is what I haven't done yet, because the first demonstration I did for you guys was just the skulls. There is no proportional system. As I mentioned on the first day of the class, in order to do this, we need a proportional system, a measuring system. And as what happens is the measuring system is like training wheels. It's to guide your thinking, and we're going to do it in this measuring system over and over and over again. And after about 4 weeks of doing it, you're going to get so familiar with it that you won't need the measuring system. You're going to know exactly where our major landmarks fall. And the system that we use is based on the head. And so the cranium, excuse me, sorry about the intermission, but last week we talked about the cranium. The cranium is a 5-eyed cube, and that becomes our measuring system for the entire body. In the classroom, I pointed out how that cranium goes through the body in an amazing way. So our cranium, as we know, is going from the base of the nose to the base of the skull, and it's not going to the front of the face. Cranium is ending about here, and this is another eye sticking out, as we talked about, and we'll go through it again today. That cranium, we can measure it through the body, as now you're about to find out. And they're going to hit major landmarks. The major landmarks need to be memorized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start about here. And I have to be careful with how I plot this, because I want to try to get 3 views on. Let's take it to here. I'm just trying to imagine if this will work. I think I should pull it off. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and you're going to do the same, is we're going to make two boxes stacked. Just trying to get the lines a little straighter. They don't need to be perfect, but I want to get them close. So, as what you're going to do in your sketchbooks, take your width, like I'm about to do, and measure it into the height, and measure down once, twice, okay? And is what you're going to do, so now we got a 5-eyed cube. The height and the width is the same, okay? So if you got them right, which mine look a little off, actually they're pretty close, okay? So I'm going to keep it like that. So you got yourself 2 boxes stacked up. Now, we're going to take the middle of this one, and you're going to get used to making these, and we'll make them much faster in the future. You're going to find midway of this one. Okay, so I'm going to say that's about midway. Take that measurement, measure it over, that looks close. And then drop another vertical line. So this is the head, part of the jaw, where the neck will be. Now we're going to come up with the rib cage, as you'll see how the rib cage fits into this measuring system. So take a horizontal line is what we're trying to eye, and then we'll measure it. We're going to put 4 boxes here, and so this wants to be the width of a box. So take half of that distance, bring it out here. Looks close. I will measure it to make sure, and it's very, very close. Drop it. Do the same on the other side. And again, setting up these measuring systems take a moment, but it's going to be worth it for you. because it's going to show you all of our landmarks. So I want to make sure this is close. It's still on target, which is good. Now come down again, measure halfway, and eventually, you know, when you do these at home, you can eye them and you'll get them pretty close. I just want to measure them all out today. The next time we do this, I think I'm just going to eye them and put them in. Okay, so there's our first one. So, we've got our cubes, which is representing the cranium. Therefore, from the front view, put in your ball. So place your ball in this one. Say if we found midway just for the fun of it. One way to find midway is put an X in it. And it's kind of a shabby midway, which tells us our jaw is going to come down about this far, right? We talked about if you measure a hairline, which would be about that far, you just measure that up, and then that would be our measurements. Now, we talked about the head being a ball and an egg, so I'm not going to belabor this. However, the egg, remember, in the front is narrower than the ball. Our jaw hooked up maybe about this far out, so I'm going to make it maybe about there. I'm going to make it just so it's kind of equal on both sides. As this egg comes around, it would get near, our ball would get narrower. So that's our general conception for the mass concept of the head that we were talking about in our last demonstration. Okay. We're not going to break this all down. I'm just going to put a couple little marks on it just to go back and get you guys to remember. So remember, if we took this up, if all of you should know, we bring this up, we're at the brow line. We come up, we should be at the hairline, which we are. Halfway would be our eyes, so measure them, make sure they're pretty close, So remember a couple little things we did. We took this as being high, we brought it around, we made an angle, and we brought that across. And we have our simple center line. From the center line, we put a curve in here. For the glabella, we brought the curve up to show the plane break in the head. This became our plane break for the side of the head. Around the orbital area, and then the glabella was in here. And then the simple nose, which I'm not going to get belabor, I'm just going to lay in some loose shapes. And then, of course, as we would know, parting of the lips are going to be about halfway. So we can use a simple little curve for the upper lip and under the lower lip. Okay, so our simple breakup for the head. Our jaw came down just a little further, angled over, a little further and angled over, and then these lines come down, pick up the plane breaks, and again for our cheeks, okay? So our general conception for our head. Now, our first rib is going to be set up where, say if you got about a half eye width there, about like that. I'm going to put a little place where the opening of our ribs is going to be, and it's going to go in here like this. So we place our first rib about as high as we can, as I've got it. I'm keeping a little loose along the edges because it will change a little as the manubrum goes in. But there's our generalization. Is what happens is the manubrum that we talked about is going to be here. So I'm going to say it's going to sit right on this line. So what I'm going to do is lighten this up a little bit. We're going to make it about as wide as this. I'm going to take this end. We'll just put a little marker just so we don't get the manubrum too big. It's very easy to do that. So about that wide. And so from there, this is the first rib. It's going to come down a little bit. Like I said, this is going to be real small. So I did it larger for you guys at the beginning. So that's going to be like here. And our top is going to come in where there's going to be a slight concave and then a concave. That concave edge meets our construction line of the cube, okay? And this one will do the same. So is what you'll get. It's small, so I'm going to use this. So you're going to get one concave, 2, 3, straight, and there's our little shape for the manubrum. Again, the important thing of the landmarks here is this construction line coming through, and this being just a little bit above it, and then our clavicle is going to start right there on the line. So now we're trying to put this system of our points, like the manubrum, into a measuring system. And this is what you want to get familiar with. Where are these points? How far down is this in our second cube? It's about as far down as I've got it. And then our gladiolus is going to start here. And then on this side, it'll do the same. So, gladiolus. Bottom of the gladiolus, Insoform Cartilage. About down as low as I have it. This then becomes our important construction line for how wide the ribs are. So I'm going to place a line in there. The width of our ribs, as I mentioned, is at the bottom of the Insoform Cartilage, and our ribs will not touch the edge of the construction block. It's in just very little bit, okay? So in other words, the 5i cube here from the middle to here is a little wide. This is wider than our rib cage, okay? So after a while you get familiar with how these things go together. So the 10th rib, which is going to hit this construction line, is almost the middle of the cube, not quite, but where I've got it, about here. So with that in mind, you can take this line and you can bring it to your widest and bring it through and get your general construction for the feeling of the rib cage, okay? The opening of the rib cage on the bottom, people break this opening down in different ways. Some people will use the opening of where the costal cartilage is, and there's cartilage that runs along here. I'm going to show you where the line is in a moment, and then where the ribs are. Some of us will use 2 construction lines. The guy I watched for years, Robert Beverly Hale, will use 3. I like to sum it up in 2 because it makes 2 planes. But you're going to kind of come up with your own kind of interpretation eventually. Look at the ribs. When I look at the ribs, I see it easily broken up into 2, plus it makes 2 planes in the rib cage. So all of us do it slightly different, okay? But wherever you do it, it does start from here, And I'm going to run this line probably only about down to here. And it's going to represent ultimately my 7th rib. This is the 10th rib. And so I kind of take it to where when I look at the skeleton, I see a point where it appears that the 7th rib, which is our last true rib, stops, and the other ones, false ribs we call them because they're connected together, begin. So what I'm doing is just trying to get a simple breakup. And so I use a feel of a convex like this and start from the same point. And so this is, in a way, it's representing, I extend it a little bit, it's representing down to the 7th rib, okay? Again, this is my interpretation. Other people, like I said, Robert Beverly Hale comes up with 3. I've seen it done in different ways. So this is our bottom of our rib cage, and ultimately, as you're going to find out, this is going to be our 10th rib. And so I take the next grouping and do it this way. And it's going to represent, this is 7, my last 3 false ribs down here, okay? This is a bigger distance from here to here. So if you get it right, when you look at it on the skeleton, say if you chose to do it the way I do it, these distances are pretty accurate to what they would be on the skeleton, the way you would see the breakup, the way that I'm doing it here. So this would be here, and this would come around. And if I have it right, it should angle in a little bit. It shouldn't be perfectly vertical. So if this is perfectly vertical, it's off a little bit. So it's usually like that. Now, I'll just mention why I like doing it this way. Sometimes if I'm just drawing the rib cage without ribs as a form, I can come up with a line here, and it's a plane break. And it connects to my plane break. And so I can immediately get a form of how the rib cage makes a form as a mass concept, rather than just as a series of ribs. So I like to do it that way. For me, the 3 get a little bit confusing. So there we go, costal cartilage at the opening of the rib cage, okay? You want to come up with your way in order to stylize it so that you can do it over and over and over again very easily. Now, there is what's known as the line of the angle of the ribs. You're not going to see it too well on this little skeleton. In the classroom, I pointed it out, so you should be a little familiar with it. But the ribs on the back angle out radically. So from the back view, they angle out quickly and then quickly turn. And the scapula falls right on what we call the line of the angle of the ribs. And so that now we need to find. The line of the angle of the ribs usually falls midway between this point and this point. And it will follow the curvature of the rib cage. So if I kind of plot it like this and do that, I might have it a little bit to the right, but I'm going to keep it there. I'm going to keep it there ultimately just because of when I place in the ribs, I think it'll look better as a design. So I'm going to do that, and the one on this side, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to take it about midway and try to keep them roughly the same. Now, if you notice, there's an angle to this, which means your ribs on an egg is what happens is there's a curve there. So if the scapula, the bottom of it was here, so the scapula is what happens is follows on this angle. So originally we generalized it and I went straight like this, right? We came up with a shape like that. But now we're going to do this. This is a generalization. It's got to feel like it curves on that mass, okay? So a lot of drawing is trying to imagine a form, and then how do these planes curve over the form, right? Anyways, I got this one different than the other one. I'm going to make them the same. I put the bend in it. I didn't want to. So what I'm doing is just generalizing it around like this, just to kind of show you how this now curves to the form underneath it, different from this. So in reality, this does this, okay? So now we're working with the front view, and so is what's going to happen is we're going to use this line as a guideline. And so we're going to take this angle is now going to come down about here because it's going to hit the rib cage right about there and do this. And then it's going to come over about down to here. The glenoid cavity would be maybe about as wide as this. It would stick out a little bit. And I have to try to get a sense for its angle. It will be coming out at me a little bit like that. So there'd be a little bit of an angle to it like this, say. And then this is the bottom of it. It would come this way and then around. And so this line is doing this. Okay, so what I'm saying is with the perspective now, this isn't on the rib cage like this. The rib cage is curved, so the scapula itself isn't flat. It angles out like this, if you've got it right, which means you're going to see some of the opening of this glenoid cavity, okay, from the front view. So I think I might have it a little bit too wide. I'm going to narrow it just a shade. So this angle that I'm using is just how, what's the angle of it. I think I'm going to keep it the way I've got it, even though that might be a little wide, just so everybody can see it clearly. Now, from this view is what I want to show you is a blow up of the front view, which I didn't do, because the coracoid process is tricky. So remember, this is our coracoid process. And so from this angle, you're going to get it like an angle like this. Now this is going to angle up. This is going to come down. And then we're going to get a little bit of the opening of the glenoid cavity. And say it's going to be like this. Okay? Now, is what's going to happen on this side. You're not going to see it well, but you'll see it in the classroom well. This is going to angle down, there's a little bend, and you got to get familiar with this shape. So this comes down the way I've got it, and then is what it's going to do is this is angling this way, which means this piece is at an angle like this. Because of that, there's an angle that goes this way, like that. This stays on the same angle, up. All right, follow me now. This angle opposing this angle, this comes up a little bit, and it's like a little thumb that sticks out like this. So it's a little piece in there like that. Now, it seems small, and why would you want to put that in there? But like I'm saying, that piece is important because when we start to have an arm placed in here, we have the humerus bone in here, right? And you have this bone in here. When I do the bicep muscle that's going to be in here, one of these heads is going to connect to that bone, okay? And we want to know exactly where it is and where it's going to connect, and other things are going to connect to it. This piece helps hold the head of the humerus in place, so it's important to play with that over and over. Don't think it's just an added detail. I need you to get familiar with it. So it's going to do this. Of course, this is a small version. I'm going to angle it. Again, in the opposite angle is my superior angle. And I'm going to, when I do bring it around and up, this angle on the inside is still angling to the left. And then I'm going to come up with the curve of it. And then it's going to come around. And then sit in there like that. Okay? So, again, it's hard to see because that's small. I'm going to make it just a little clearer. Okay, so there's our piece. So what I need you to do is quickly construct the one on the other side. So place in our pieces. Again, this is going to angle towards us a little bit. Place in our shape. As you notice, I overlapped the construction line a little bit. That's exactly what would happen. This is to overlap the construction line a little bit. Watch those things. Those are not accidents. This is going to come through, angle down, angle up, come over. And there's our little coracoid process. Okay. So he's in place. Now is what we're going to do is we're going to come up with the spine of the scapula from the back view or from the front view. So on the big version, this would come up like this. Our construction plane, our line that we have is here. And so this line is coming up like this. It's going to angle down a little bit like this. I'm going to put a plane to it. This is going to curve out and quickly in, and this is going to do this. And that's what it looks like from the back side. It's important, this plane, because the clavicle bone is going to connect to it. Okay? So that's the idea. So is what we do is we find our high point, which is right about here. It's going to break right at the construction block right there. So this is going to now come down ever so little, like this. I'm going to put a little plane on the top of it. Don't forget the plane. And now this is going to come out a little bit, around, and quickly in, like that. And then this is a strong concave. Concave would go behind the coracoid process, so I'm just going to swing it in like that. Okay? So there is our shoulder. Okay? So the other one will do the same. This is going to come up. It's going to angle down. This is going to swing out a little bit and abruptly in, and this is simple concave. Okay, so pieces are now in place. Clavicle bone, so is what I'm going to do is our first rib is here. I'm going to just place that in. So this comes through. This would wrap around. There's our first rib. Okay, it's hard to see on here because I know it's small, but do my best on it. So the first rib now is in place. Now, clavicle bone. Clavicle bone, I'm going to get rid of any kind of lines that might get in our way here. The front view is one of the most challenging. So once you get this and you practice with it, the other views are a little easier. This isn't. I do these things better if I'm not thinking about them. Okay, that's better. Okay, that's. Anyways, I'm going to leave it. It's a little high, but it's all right. So here we go. This is going to sit in here like this, a little ball, let's just say. It's thick. All right, so we're going to take this first plane right here, and I'm going to angle it to the rib cage, like back a little bit. Now, this is going up. So what happens is, I know the pectoral muscle is going to sit up against this line. So I'm making it a very clear, distinct angle. And I want you to do the same. And I'm bringing that up now, and a lot of times, if you watch anatomy demonstrations, they won't bring this out. But if you know this now, it's going to make it real easy when we get into the pectoral muscles, because that's exactly where it's going to be. So this is going to do this, and then it's going to move up like this, up a little bit, and then down. So I'm going to place 3 little movements in there. And then the clavicle, the big thing you want to know about it, it's a little bit higher. It's a little bit higher, if you can see it. It's a little bit higher than the clavicle bone. Hopefully all of you can see that. So this should be a step higher and a step below. It's very important. And so this is coming up, down, and then it's going to bring itself down like this, and then connect here, okay? So that's the clavicle on the right. again, these things, you've got to work with them, you've got to play with them, and just to simplify them as much as you can, and to think about their shapes. What's so crucial, like I'm saying, are the angles. Because here I know eventually the deltoid muscle will connect, so my plane is distinct and clear. Here I know the pectoral muscle will connect, and so the plane is distinct and clear. Eventually we got a muscle connecting here. And this wants to be a little bit higher. So again, just taking the time to break those down so that you can get the idea for the future, so it all makes sense. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. This is going up a little bit, and it's a flat kind of, I'm making it a clear, clean angle, not quite as low as the clavicle ball, like the head of it like comes a little lower than it, so it looks like it goes up like that. All right. So from that angle, it extends just a little beyond the rib cage, like that one. Then it makes a slight concave up, and then it goes down and meets on the inside, right where I've got it, and then it rises up a little higher than our and then comes in. So clavicle number 2. So again, when you're practicing this on your own, our measuring system is going to tell us where things need to be. Okay, so it's a very important system. This being a little higher than this is crucial. I got to get you to watch that over and over. When you're drawing from the model and you do the skeletal overlays in there, those are the things I'm going to really look for when I'm grading the drawing. Okay, so this is pretty much it from our front view. Okay, the only other thing I'm going to show you right now is a little bit with the ribs on here, and then I'm going to move quickly to the back. But I'm only going to show you some of the characteristics of the ribs on the front. And then I'm going to let you search out the rest. So, about midway between here, between the edge of the rib cage and the front, midway of that cube, which is, we're going to say here, I'm going to measure it. I think it's close. It's close. I just want to keep it a little bit away from the scapula, but it would be about midway. That's our 5th rib, okay? So is what artists do is we place the 5th rib, so place it there, and then is what happens is we've got the 1st rib already in place. So we've got 1, 5, and this is the 10th rib. The 10th rib falls within our construction. There's 2 other independent ribs that come a little bit lower than this, okay? They're no need to us as a landmark because they're buried in your skin, okay? So anyways, if we've got the 1st, we've got the 5th, we've got the 10th, it's easy to place the ones in between. Now, there's a line that's running, a construction line that runs, and you're going to see this in your anatomy books. You'll see it on the skeleton, but where the cartilage meets the bone, there's a line. There's no technical name for it, but it's just where the line meets the cartilage. And so if we can hit the 5th, we know the cartilage is going to hit at that point in the middle. And I know the cartilage is going to hit here. And it starts real close on this 1st rib, if you can see it. The 1st rib connects to the manubrum there. The line starts a little bit to the left. And so now we connect these points. So it's going to follow the feel of the rib cage. So it follows like a slight concave this way and a slight convex that way. And so again, our halfway point, this is our halfway point. Keep these points in mind. You want to memorize them. The manubrum is starting here, halfway. It's a 5-eyed cube, right? Our scapula, just so that you can keep this in mind, our scapula is exactly as big as the cranium. Amazing, right? The distance of our head, this is how amazing God's design is. So you take the cranium here, and it's the space between the scapula. So if you do the scapula right, the way I showed you, all of these pieces fall into place. So in other words, this distance will be perfect to the head, perfect to what it ought to be. So we've got, this is a cranium, this is a cranium, okay. So you want to memorize that. So as we play with different views, we can locate these landmarks as we turn them and twist them, okay? How wide is the front of your body? Now you guys know. It's 2 cranium widths wide from the front view. That's a big question everybody asks me at the BBAC, people who don't know the anatomy. How wide is your shoulders? That's what it is, 2 cranium widths. So anyways, with that in mind, is what we're going to do is our second rib starts here. It starts, part of it is above the break of the manubrum and part of it is below, so it's kind of in the middle. So is what would happen is this one would start behind this one and come around like this. And then this would come around like this. But the problem is, once I get to this point of where the cartilage is, this would begin to go up a little bit like this. Okay, it makes a turn. And so then we know where that is. And this was the break to my superior angle. I'm going to get rid of it. So now we got rib 1, 2. I'm going to place 3 and 4. And 5 is going to connect here. So 5 is going up. I just want to get them equally placed, right? Bring them up a little bit. Okay, so there we go. So 5 is going here. This curve has a purpose. There's 7 ribs to here. There's 2 ribs that are connecting into the lower plane of this. Okay, so that's why there's a bend in the sternum bone. So anyways, this one's going to wrap around like this. It's going to get to the costal cartilage, and it's going to pull up a little bit. This one's going to wrap around like this, and it gets the costal cartilage, and it's going to ride up a little bit. And so right on through. Anyways, so our 5th one is coming from about here. So anyways, that will go like that. These aren't quite as angled, but they're close. Mostly I need you to memorize the 1st, the 5th, take note to how these ribs go. There's more of a curve to them than I'm putting them in, but watch it when you guys do them. So anyways, there's one in here, so I'm going to place it here. And there's another one here. And that would connect to my line right there. So again, the 7th one, this is the edge of the 7th rib right in here. So then there's 3 others that go in here, and they move up quite abruptly as they make their turns. Okay? And so that's basically the rib cage. We'll mostly, again, the 5th, the 1st, the 10th, very crucial. And ultimately, when we connect muscles over this, the 5th is going to be a crucial one, the 1st one, the 10th one. The rest of them aren't going to be as important, okay? So that's our first simple structure. So I'm going to go through the back view quickly, and the side view will go the quickest. So I've got to place, I got to imagine now, try to get this in place. I am going to do it roughly the same. So you're going to set up, and if you, in your sketchbooks, if you do have room next to it, if you do it this way, it can go a little quicker, right? I'm just going to take a quick check, see if I'm close. Uh-oh, something's off a little bit. Okay, it's close. If you get them close, that's what you want. Make one more check. Check yours, make sure they're pretty close, okay. Again, come up with your halfway, double it. Okay, so everybody's got their boxes set up. They're always, when they're in perspective, the higher ones always look a little different than the lower ones. Okay, so anyways, our back view. We start off again, our 5-eyed cube. So we start off with our circle. Find your center. Remember, with the back of the cranium, one of the things we're doing is, again, we're just going to walk through this real quickly. This became a straight line. This line from the side dropped, and it gave us the characteristic of the back of the head. This line now is gone. And we had the mastoid process. Mastoid process took a little angle in, and we had a plane break here. Like this. Watch, I'm putting a little bit of an ellipse, but also at the same time thinking of it as a turn, a plane. So I'm taking a center, a side. This connected to plane on the back of the head. This went to the parietal eminence. And this came to our plane break. So all of this down planes. This would take a slight from the parietal eminence. It would come up and around because of how we're looking at it. So we talked all about that last week. Our jaw, so again, find your midway point. And so our jaw, if I have it right, this is midway, it's midway, well, our jaw is going to be about there, midway is a little lower. And so remember, of course, on the back of the skull, we used a little triangle coming down here. And I try to get used to placing it in, even in these little quicker sketches. Placing the little triangle. And then, of course, the angle of the jaw was coming in this way, and this way. So watch the same on the other side. And then we set up a little bit of the inside of how the mouth would be. So again, just kind of walking you through it one more time. Okay, so that was the back view of our skull. Same as the front, pretty much. And so the opening of how you're going down, of how you're going to breathe is going to be, it's going to be about a half eye width on each side, probably about to here. Sometimes people will draw like a little cube and put an ellipse in it, but you know, you could just kind of loosely place it. So, the back of our rib cage in place as far as the top of it. Now, the front of it is low. This is now the back of the rib cage. It would be high. There will be, I'm going to point it out today, but we'll talk about it next week in depth. On the spine, this is the 7th vertebrae spine. And it's a landmark from the back view. I do want to place it today because the rib cage now we're imagining through. The manubrum is now here, right? It's on the other side. I'm not going to place it in. And we know the sternum is here. We know the insoform cartilage is here. So we know then, so you're trying to imagine through. So then we know that our widest point of the rib cage is there. So we've got the width. It's a little narrower like it is from the front. So all of that you imagine through. So now we know our 10th rib is going to be about here on this, about here on this side, of course. And so now take from your ellipse the widest point here and just begin to work with your construction. And so we're going to do the same on the other side. Okay, so we come up with our generalized shape for our rib cage from the back view. Make my checks one more time. Okay, good. Let's keep things on target. Okay. So now, the opening of the back of the rib cage is what you're going to notice is different from the front. So the bottom, you're going to have these ribs. Your 10th rib is going to be about here coming down, so it's low. So it's going to be pretty much starting about right here, we would say, and it's going to come around like this, a concave line. 10th rib. So now we're going to come up with the line of the angle of the ribs. We're going to start from the top of our ellipse now rather than from the bottom. And we're going to do just like we did before. You're going to try to find that middle. Keep the curve going to the line. Echo the edge of the rib cage, right? So let's try to get it about right. Try to get it close. If it's right, this distance in between, as we talked about, should be a cranium width, and so that's pretty close. So you want to set it up where you have the cranium length. Okay. So that's the line of the angle of the ribs. The line of the angle of the ribs technically would follow all the way down. So in the future, when we get into the muscles, we will follow it down. I'm just going to do it today because I'm going to make another connection for you. So I'm going to put the scapula in now from this angle. So what will happen is we got the line of the angle of the ribs, and now we're going to take our superior angle of the scapula, which is going to be here. Okay. So now we're doing it from the back view. So this is coming up, this coming down to about, let's just say, here. And now, because the scapula from the back view is angled back. It's not parallel, it's angled back. You don't see anything of the opening of the glenoid cavity. You see it go back, okay? So because of that going back like that, this will stick out a little bit and you get a convex rather than a concave. And then what will happen is that'll veers at a slight angle up. And then this is going to angle in. And then the inferior angle, I just build it in there ever so gradually, so it does that. So that's your inferior angle. So we're going to do the same on the other side. So we're going to follow this across, so we know exactly where to do this. This is following the point of our measurement. So this is going this way. This line is coming down to about here. And then this, it veers out a little bit. If I had it right, this would veer out a little bit more on this side. In other words, it's faced up slightly, so it would come out like that and stay out, and then this would come up. So this would come out a little bit. This angle, again, like that, more severe, comes around. We got our bend. Okay. So this is the feel of our scapula from the back view. Now, let me get this a little more. Okay, so the spine of the scapula, as we talked about, it's going to originate from here and it's going to pull itself up. So I'm going to originate it from there. I'm just going to put on a guideline and it's going to do that, giving us that wonderful curve that we talked about. So the height of the scapula, or the chromium process, it's about midway, because the clavicle bones are higher than the pit of your neck. They do angle up. So we usually take them about midway of this outlet, and so it's coming up. And remember, they're going to break just outside of our guideline. So I'm going to take it about here, just a little outside of it, and then we're going to angle this down ever so little. And then remember, that's going to wrap around and up and then curve this way. And this one's just going to take a little concave and around, and then there's going to be a strong undercut. Okay, so it's going to be in there. Try to get rid of some of the construction lines so you can see it better. So this is going to swing around like that. Okay, that's better. So underneath, I'm just going to darken it a little bit so we can put on a plane. So you can see it a little clearer. I'm going to get rid of my guidelines so you can see it a little bit clearer. Okay. All right, so that's the spine on this side. You want to play with the spine and try to come up with a really nice construction. The better you can get those constructions, the better it's going to be as we begin to get into the muscles. So I'm just trying to lift out a little bit of the light for the top plane so you can see it better. I'm going to go after the one on the other side. So on this side is what we'll do is we'll take the height of this one, follow it across. Okay, so we're going to bring it down, say about here. And then we're going to put a strong angle for the underplane. And I'm going to get rid of some of the lines, so hopefully you can see the shape a little better. Very important to get the shape of it. And as what we'll do is, like the last one, we will place a little bit of value underneath so that we can see the plane itself. Okay, so pretty much that's our spine. Give me just a second here. Okay. All right. I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. Okay, so spine 1, spine 2. Basically, this is our back view. Again, with the ribs, this is going to be our 10th. The ribs back here, usually this is the line of the angle of the ribs. So when ribs do go in, when you place them, they're going to come out very steep like this. Out very steep and then around. But I'm not going to place them on there. Mostly I'm interested in this. Now is what I want to show you is a little bit of the clavicle bone from this angle. So I want to get rid of my construction lines. You remember what those represented. I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, so there we go. So is what will happen here. This line is going to follow all the way up to our trapezius muscle here. But I'm just going to place it in now. It would be very narrow and it would connect. So I'm going to have you connect it. I'm just going to have you get into the habit of watching these lines of how these pieces ultimately connect together. So this is going to actually follow all the way down. And eventually the spinalis muscles of your body are going to do the same. Now, we can still see my lower ellipse. And the lower ellipse is here. That's where the clavicle bones would originate. So, is what's going to happen with these clavicle bones here is on the end, they come up ever so little because it's doing this. And then once it comes up a little bit, it's going to quickly pull itself back down to that point. And that might be a little thick from this angle, but I'm going to narrow it just ever a little touch for you. That's the clavicle bone. That would come all the way through, of course, to the other side. The other one will do the same. So it comes up ever so little. Angles down. Angles down. So you got to imagine following it through to the front view. So that's our back view. Now, we're going to do our one last view. So again, with this, the importance is how does the clavicle connect to the chromium process, to the spine. Watch that this is a little higher. It's going to jump down. Eventually, the bone of the arm is going to go in here and stick out even a little bit further. Watch the line of the angle of the ribs, scapula following along it. Watch the spine of the scapula. Try to get the inside, the chromium process, and so forth. The width of our ribs. Basically is what that's about. Now I'm going to go for our last angle. And so we're going to take, well, let's see. I'm going to place it about here. And hopefully I might try to keep the same distance. I think I can pull it off. Well, it might be a little bit smaller, but that's okay. see, check one more time. It's close. So, with you guys, with our profile, we're doing 4 stacked boxes. So I'm going to come up with my first. Looks pretty close. Going to check it to make sure. Check yours, make sure it's close. Hopefully we're on target. Good. Good. Okay. Profile. Start off your drawing from the profile or lateral view with your ball. Now we can use a ball and an egg. We talked a little bit about this idea of having an angle going in here. I could do that, or I could just kind of start from about roughly there and hook in an egg shape. Now the egg shape would come out probably not far as I'm making it, probably to about there. So you can use the ball and the egg, same kind of idea, like that. And this angle that we talked about before, if you follow that around, you're at your widest point. This would ultimately come around. You would have a little bit of the angle of the jaw. And this would be about like so. In the end, this distance, if we have it right, should be an eye less than going up, which is about right. So anyways, you can experiment with the ball and the egg. And then you can begin to shape it from there. Our distance here, if we have it right, if we take this up once, we should be at the eyebrows. If you remember, this should be about right for the hairline. So all that would work. Halfway should be about here, which would mean, if we got it right, that's pretty close. Okay. All of that would work. Our jaw, remember, if you remember this from last week, if we've got this right, it should be about halfway across, which is about halfway. So that's our simple construction for the ball and the egg. Remember, base of nose, brow, so this would come out, would come in a little bit. Eyebrow would come up a little bit around and to this line and around. Eye, if you put it in, would be at this angle. Uh-oh, come on, Dan. Would be at this angle, and then the nose gonna angle out. Gonna be in here, under plane of nose. It's gonna be in there. Eventually, you would take this plane where we're making our change to it, and there'd be the plane, front plane of the forehead. This would fall on our temporal line. This is a loose rendition. This is the plane break for the eyebrow. So this, if you follow that around, you hit the high point of the jaw and our zygomatic arch. The feel of the ear would swing around in here like this. So anyways, just a loose construction, so there's something there. A lot of times we'll take a corner of an eye and we find this line. And then usually this will come out a little bit and in and around, okay? So these are simple breakups. So these points, the opening from our profile, we're gonna start right about here. This angle is going up. This is going up from the profile. You can now see it. This is going up about as high as that. Comes back to about here. Okay, so watch that angle. You probably wouldn't see an opening, but I'm going to put a very little of it just because I think I'm going to connect the top of the manubrum up there. So here's our first angle. I'm going to continue it out just so you can see the angle. The manubrum changes and it's on an angle like this. The manubrum will go from here to here. Okay, I just want you to see the various angles. The sternum changes almost equally like the others, about like this to here. Okay. So this is going like this. Manubrum would go to there. This angle of the gladiolus would go like that. So these angles, you want to watch them. There's 1, 2, 3, and they're about equal if you get them right. The Insoform Cartilage, now this is an important landmark. It's the widest point of the rib cage, but from the side view, it becomes vertical, and so we want to locate it. Our widest point of the back of the rib cage is about this far down our construction block, okay? It's about 1/3. And so now you're taking this line and running it to it. This rides along, begins to break and go almost to the middle. Okay. Gladiolus, sternum comes out, Insoform cartilage. Cartilage, this that you're seeing from the front, from the profile, actually sticks out and wraps around like this, giving us the feel of the rib cage from the profile. All right, that's better. So, our rib cage, what is it? 2 craniums. This part comes up a little bit, the same part. The opening is up a little bit, always making the 7th vertebrae spine, which is going to be right here, always makes it higher than the sternum. So characteristic of people. So high in the back, low in the front. Low, 7th vertebrae spine would be here, always being high. So watch for that angle. Okay, the manubrum, it's from the side you don't see too much of it, but I'm just going to gesture in a couple of lines. So as what happens is there'd be a little concave to it like this, and then it would come up and we would see where the clavicle would connect, the first kind of curve, and then it will make a curve and come down here like this. So that's probably all you would see, and probably you can't even see that in the illustration, but it would look something like that from the profile. Our scapula now, okay, that's better. Our scapula now, as we know, all of them are coming up to the same points, coming up to our construction line. This one, same thing from here. So the back part of this scapula, the curve, the superior angle, is up here. And so it's going to do this, and then this is going to come down this way. So the scapula is fitting between those 2 points. then this angle, now because the scapula is from the profile, it's going to be very narrow. So rather than being as wide as this, it's going to decrease. And so then the opening of the glenoid cavity is going to be in here like this, and it's going to be somewhat facing us. I'll try to get it in just a touch clearer. So one way we can do this is this side of it kind of echoes this, and then it comes down, makes a shape like that. And right from about the middle of this, you bring it, makes that movement in, out, and then out. So I'm going to get rid of, you can see where the rib cage is. I'm just going to get rid of it just so it doesn't get in our way at the moment. So now we've got the scapula. I feel about like I've got it. Okay. Now, our clavicle bone, I'm going to lighten up my construction lines here so that you can see what will happen with it. The clavicle bone is here, and it starts off, and it would sit about right there. And it's going to sit in there. And so this part of it is going to begin to move out a little bit towards us, and then quickly up, and then around and down. Now, this is going to connect into the glenoid. This is the glenoid, but the chromium process. So I'm just going to connect it right to the chromium process. So bear with me for a minute. Chromium process is going to be here, and it moves up abruptly down. The spine of it is now here, and then makes a little turn like right here. So it's doing this, the quick abrupt turn and then over. Okay, so this, as you can see, is coming down. This comes over, this piece, this piece. Now is what you'll see is now it's a joining into it, the clavicle. It'll join into about right there. It would become straight along the back. I got rid of my ideas, but if you remember the three parts when you look back. So this is 1, 2, 3. In the back it's straight right there, and then it makes its movement down and then around, okay? So that's how it looks. Now, it's a tricky thing to get from the angle because it's all in perspective. But mostly is what you want to do is just play around with simple shapes. A lot of us just think of a general S-curve, but you want to connect those pieces. Eventually, the lowness of this to this is important. So is what will happen, just to kind of show you what relationships will ultimately do. If this is our cranium, the atlas bone sits in the middle of the cranium, and the spine is going to connect here. So this is going to do this, okay? That spine eventually is going to move out, and this is going to be our 7th vertebrae spine here. And it's going to be right there, and it sticks out. Everybody can see it. Eventually, there's a muscle that comes in here, and it's going to come all the way down to here. All of you have seen that muscle, and it's going to bring out the whole shoulder. So this point to this point is important. So this needs to be low, this needs to be higher. So what's so crucial in figure drawing is getting the points right, not as much of the subtle articulation. So anyways, that's mostly it from the side. Our 10th rib now is going to be here. I'm going to let you search out these ribs from the profile, but the 10th rib would end up being there. The costal cartilage would be here, and eventually this is going to move up to the costal cartilage, and then these are going to move around. And eventually that line that separates the cartilage, because the sternum is in here, the line that separates the cartilage from the bone is going to ride along here and then eventually out. So it's going to be way out like this, and it's going to move. I'm going to let you guys search that out. So again, these landmarks from the side, is what I would suggest is playing around with the shape of this rib cage over and over in the system without the system, watching this angle to these angles and just freehanding it as well as doing it in the system. And we will see you in class, and I will see you in the video in our next demonstration.